Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A top 10 of facts that we saw contested vigorously over the last year. COVID-19 is real and can kill you. Masks protect us. Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines are safe and effective. Joe Biden won the presidential election. There were no massive instances of voter fraud. It was Trump supporters that stormed the Capitol on January 6th. There are 530 members of Congress that are capitalists and about 5 that are Democratic Socialists. The federal government infected Black men with syphilis from 1932 to 1972. A third of Puerto Rican women were forced sterilized from 1930 to 1970, both by the federal government. And lastly, the earth is still round. I say this because you see so many of these facts were the subject of intense campaigns of misinformation in social media, in newspapers, in broadcasting, and I get we have to strike a balance on this. First, I want to ask Ms. O'Brien, who obviously has the show Matter of Fact, about how important it is to get the facts right, particularly regarding COVID-19, vaccines, and other key public health facts when it comes to communicating with communities of color.
Clearly, it's absolutely essential, especially for vulnerable populations, because obviously when there's lots of misinformation or disinformation or just flat out lies, then you run the risk that people are making decisions off of this misinformation. On the show that I do, Matter of Fact, we've consistently been dipping back into communities of color to talk to them about their fears, their concerns, and talking to experts as well as we follow what's happening with the vaccine. I think it's really critical. But I think it's essential to remember that robust dialogue is great. It just has to be robust dialogue around facts. This idea that, speech and more speech, all great, as long as it's centered in facts. And I think we should be really clear to tease out misinformation and disinformation and lies are very different than people just having disagreements over a set of facts.
And what do you think the consequences could be of continued massive falsehoods regarding vaccines and COVID-19 among communities of color?
We've already seen many communities of color are very slow to get access to the vaccine. Sometimes that's structural, and sometimes it's because they have had a history of distrust in the medical profession. And so there are already concerns there. And it's one of the reasons we keep dipping back into this story consistently, almost every other week, to make sure we're elevating that conversation.
Thank you so much. Professor Turley, it's great to see you again. Enjoyed your classes at GW Law. Always a pleasure to have you in committee. We saw a huge Spanish language misinformation campaign in South Florida, in particular in our state, blaming Antifa and BLM for the Capitol insurrection. The FCC already has laws in the books that if you knowingly broadcast false information that will cause substantial public harm, that it's illegal. Is this one of the proper ways we could pursue making sure that we have some truth in broadcasting and existing laws? Would that be a way to strike that balance by the FCC looking at and beefing up their Spanish language staff?
Well, thank you again, Congressman. It's good to see you again. I wish I could say that that was a potential avenue. I don't think it is a workable avenue because it quickly gets bound up in this sort of regulation of the media and can trip these same wires under the First Amendment. There are protections, of course. You do have defamation laws, even with public figures. You can sue people. We've had a whole plethora of lawsuits recently, including by Dominion Computers, which has been suing a number of people about falsehoods that have been made. Those do have deterrent impacts. They do have an impact on media as well as non-media figures. The most important role of Congress is to be a vehicle of truth, to get that information out, and to allow the media to filter out these voices. I'm not as confident as Soledad. I have to say that I don't think it's fair to say, well, look, I'm in favor of free speech and free press as long as you're not a liar, as long as what you're saying is not untrue. And it gets us back, it's sort of circular because we end up in the same spot. Who's the arbiter of that? What is the meaning that someone's a liar and someone is being untruthful?
Thank you, Professor. And I want to give Ms.
I see
O'Brien,
the gentleman's time is, you have 4 seconds, so
my time's expired.
thank you, Mr. Soto.